So good day, everyone. Welcome back. Today, Luca and I are going to talk about supervised and unsupervised learning. Some of you may have heard of it, and today Luca is going to tell us exactly what they are. Luca?
Yes, well, supervised learning as well as unsupervised learning are two different approaches for making machine learning models or training machine learning algorithms. Let's say that supervised learning is the approach, the dominant approach, the one that is, let's say, more straightforward to implement. And it is actually quite simple also to explain. To train a machine learning model, you need data and you need labels about that data. Let's, for instance, imagine we want to train a classifier of images. That's very straightforward. We want to understand what is the content of an image. So what we do here would be to take 100 images or 100 photos from Google Images and then label these photos based on semantic categories or labels. For instance, we could have the category called animal versus person and associate images with portraying animals with the label animal, and same thing with the label humans. So in this case, in this supervised learning approach, the algorithm would take as input the labels and the images, and then we'll create the model.
All right, so basically you're providing a rule for the model to follow.
Sort of, yes.
Okay. And what about unsupervised learning?
Unsupervised learning is a little bit more complicated. The idea is that we don't need the labels to, generate this algorithm or make this algorithm functioning. Here, what we do is really to find patterns in distributions of data. So what we would do, if we go back to the analogy of the images, would be to ask the algorithm to find or to cluster or to group together images that look the same. And we would hope that the algorithm would find visual cues that would put images with people in let's say a different group from images of animals.
So you're not giving it a pattern to follow. Instead, if you give it a bunch of data, it's trying to determine if there are patterns within this set of data. Does that make sense?
Yes. We don't need as an input. In input, we only give the data, the raw data that we want to analyze. We're not giving any other help to the algorithm, and this is one of the main benefits of unsupervised learning. The fact that you don't need labels, you don't need to spend time and money to create those labels. Obviously, this comes to a price because with unsupervised learning, typically performance can be lower than the supervised approach, and it requires some tweaking. It's a little bit more difficult to put in place, let's say.
All right. So apart from these two types of learning, I've also heard about self-supervised learning. Is it related to this, or?
Yes, sort of. Let's say that self-supervised learning can be interpreted as a trade-off methodology that really stands beside unsupervised and supervised training. This was promoted, is actually heavily promoted by Jan LeCun. He's a big believer in self-supervised learning because the limitation of supervised learning is the fact that you need these labels, and it can be very expensive to generate, especially if instead of images we deal with videos, for instance. So his claim is actually that we as humans we are intelligence. Human intelligence essentially doesn't do any let's say supervised learning. We do self-supervised learning all the time, so we are able to extrapolate knowledge from the reality around us and then use that knowledge to train our brain to recognize patterns. So for instance, if we take videos, we are able to predict we might be able to predict what's coming up next in a movie or in a football match. Okay, so we would be able to, yes, given what we see we would be able to understand what comes up next. And this is exactly what self-supervised learning does. So it's a form of supervised learning that doesn't require any input, human input, to create the labels.
Oh, okay. All right. So of these three types, the one that's most predominantly used is it self-supervised or is it unsupervised learning?
For the moment, is the mainstream is still a supervised learning,
Mm.
but self-supervised learning is gaining momentum because yes, there are certain use cases where supervised learning is not an option. The labels are too expensive. So I strongly encourage our listeners to keep an eye on this last method of training algorithms that is called self-supervised learning.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Luca. So you guys, you've heard it here. Look up self-supervised learning is up and coming, and we will talk to all of you in our next episode. Thank you.